I was just glad to see that she could physically see the love one more time. You know,
It was the early morning hours of September 8th, 2024, in Indianapolis. The city, still cloaked in darkness, was settling into a quiet calm. Streetlights cast soft glows on empty roads, and the world seemed at peace. But beneath that peace, a tragedy was beginning to unfold, one that would shatter a family, horrify a community, and spark urgent conversations about trust, safety, and justice. Chanti Dixon, a 30-year-old mother of two, had just finished her overnight shift. Like so many hard-working Americans, she was simply trying to get home. She called for an Uber, a routine act that millions perform daily without hesitation. The name of the driver assigned to her ride was Francisco Valadez, a man with no outward signs of danger, a stranger with a profile, a license plate, and a star rating. What Chanti didn't know was that this man, who appeared just like any other driver on the app, harbored a darkness no background check had uncovered. What began as a quick trip home became a fatal detour, one from which she would never return. By the next morning, her loved ones would begin frantically searching for her, unaware that her life had already been taken in the cruelest of ways. Chanti's two young children were waiting. Family members were sending texts, making calls. Minutes turned into hours, and concern turned into panic. It wasn't like Chanti to disappear. She was a devoted mother, reliable and always in contact. But this time, the silence was deafening. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. By September 9th, 2024, just one day after she went missing, the worst fears of her family were confirmed. Chanti's lifeless body was discovered in a wooded area just blocks from her home. She had been shot in the head. Found alongside her were her two cell phones, abandoned near the scene as silent witnesses to what had happened. The news devastated the community. Chanti was known for her bright spirit, her dedication to her children, and her love for life. Friends and family gathered in grief, struggling to comprehend how such a horrific act could happen to someone so kind, so vibrant, and so undeserving of such a fate. The heartbreak was palpable. As detectives began piecing together the hours leading up to her death, the Uber ride came under immediate scrutiny. The digital trail pointed straight to Valadez. Surveillance, GPS data, and rideshare logs confirmed he had picked her up and never dropped her off. What followed would be a chilling confession that revealed far more than anyone had anticipated. The truth was almost too gruesome to process. Valadez admitted to trying to initiate sexual contact with Chanti. When she rejected him, when she asserted her dignity, he exploded in rage. He shot her in the head and left her to die. But that wasn't the end. Authorities say he then violated her body before discarding her in a secluded area, as though her life and humanity meant nothing. Chanti Dixon's story is not just a tragic headline. It is a warning, a wake-up call. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the systems we trust, the rides we take, the apps we use, the strangers we rely on when we're most vulnerable. Her murder is not just an isolated incident. It is a window into a broken reality. This documentary explores the life and death of Chanti Dixon. It's about more than the crime. It's about a mother, a woman, a human being who should still be here. Her voice was silenced, but her story must be heard. Because this wasn't just a night gone wrong. It was a night that should have been routine. Before she became the subject of headlines and vigils, Chanti Dixon was simply Chanti, a daughter, a mother, a friend, and a woman filled with life and laughter. Born and raised in Indianapolis, Chanti's life was marked by the kind of quiet strength that often goes unnoticed by the world, but deeply impacts everyone around her. She wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. But to the people who loved her, she was irreplaceable. Chanti was 30 years old at the time of her death, a devoted mother of two children who were her pride and joy. Everything she did for them. She worked overnight shifts, kept up with school events, and still managed to make time for hugs, birthday parties, and bedtime stories. Her children were the center of her world, and her greatest goal in life was to see them thrive. She was also ambitious. Those who knew her described her as smart, motivated, and determined to build a better future. She wasn't the kind to settle. She dreamed of starting her own business someday, of leaving a legacy that would make her children proud. Her dreams were big, but grounded in reality. She knew it would take hard work, and she was prepared to give it everything she had. Her friends remember her as someone who could light up a room. Her laughter was infectious, her energy magnetic. She was the kind of person who made people feel seen. She had a way of asking, "How are you?" and actually waiting to hear the answer. Whether you were going through a breakup or just needed someone to vent to, Chanti showed up. Every time. Family members say she was the glue that held people together. During holidays, it was Chanti who organized the gatherings. She kept traditions alive. She made sure people stayed connected even when life tried to pull them apart. That sense of unity, of togetherness, she valued it deeply. She was a nurturer by nature. Chanti's social media painted a portrait of a life filled with love. Pictures of her children, selfies with her best friends, inspirational quotes, and snapshots of everyday joy were sprinkled throughout her feed. She shared her struggles too, sometimes openly, sometimes between the lines. But she always came across as someone who was pushing forward, no matter what. Behind the strength, though, was a young woman with her own fears and vulnerabilities. Like so many single mothers, Chanti faced the constant pressure of providing for her children while managing her own needs. She didn't have it easy, but she never complained. She just kept going. And through it all, she protected her children fiercely, like any good mother would. The night she died, Chanti was doing what she always did, making responsible choices. She didn't drive home tired. She didn't take unnecessary risks. She called for a ride share, trusting the system designed to ensure safe transportation. She did everything right. And that's what makes her story all the more gut-wrenching. This wasn't a case of recklessness. It was a case of trust betrayed. Chanti's murder turned her into a statistic, but she was never just that. She was a woman who mattered. Her story reminds us that victims are not faceless or nameless. They are people with histories, families, dreams, and futures stolen in an instant. Chanti deserved more than just a moment of silence. She deserved justice. She deserved safety. She deserved to grow old with her children. Now, her name joins the long list of women who left their homes expecting to return, but never did. And as we continue this story, we must remember her not for how she died, but for how she lived, with strength, grace, and an unshakable love for her children. It was supposed to be a routine night. On April 29th, 2024, Chanti Dixon did what thousands of people do every day. She called for an Uber. She had plans, she had responsibilities, and she had every intention of getting home safely to her children. But what began as a routine decision ended in tragedy.
Also developing tonight, we're hearing from the family of a young mother who police say was shot and killed by her Uber driver.
Police believe the shooting happened on Indy's southeast side as she was coming home from work Sunday morning. Our Chase Howe joins us in studio tonight after speaking with her family.
And they told you they knew something was up when they didn't hear from her.
Yeah, Dustin, Felicia, Chanti's Dixon mom says she always checked in with her, so when she couldn't get a hold of her, she filed a police report with IMPD that next day, never thinking her daughter would end up dead. As Risa Dixon lights her cigarette, she begins to cry when thinking about her daughter, Chanti.
My heart is saying that she's going to walk through the door, say, "Hey, mama, what y'all doing?" That's what my heart's saying, but I know she not going to physically walk through the door. She always say, "Ma, you know you my best friend." And I'm like, "Girl, yeah, I know. And you my best friend."
Chanti was also a mother, an aunt, and the oldest of her siblings.
You could not miss her presence because she was going to let you know when she come through the door. And when I say, "Hey, y'all, hey, y'all." And she made sure that her kids, her nieces, her nephews, her sisters, her brother, they knew that she loved them.
Dixon says Chanti not only left an imprint on those she met, but also left them feeling loved.
She was so selfless, so selfless. She would put herself in dumb positions just to help her friends out. So take that selfless and take that love. Y'all want to remember her, y'all get a heart. Y'all get a heart and show the love. Because that's what she would have wanted and that's what she would have did.
Now, I was talking to Dixon off camera, and she told me Chanti was her oldest. And so I asked her, I'm like, what was it like when she was born? And she was just saying how Chanti was the only child of hers that never caused her any pain. And at 6 months, she was walking and talking, and she was like, well, she never stopped. So
Warm memories. Hopefully she clings to those right now. All right, Chase, heartbreaking. Thank you.
Meanwhile, we are learning more tonight about a murder investigation here in Indianapolis. A rideshare driver admits to detectives he shot and killed a female customer.
That woman's body was discovered on the near southeast side yesterday. CBS 4's Jesse Wells spoke to the woman's family and to police at the IMPD police chief about this case.
The victim's family tells me they tracked her phone down to these woods where they found her body and called police. Less than 24 hours later, IMPD had the suspect in custody and are now preaching a message of prevention. Just after 1 o'clock Monday afternoon, in these woods on Indy's near southeast side, a woman who had been reported missing hours earlier was found naked with a shirt pulled over her head. Police believe 30-year-old Chanti Dixon had been sexually assaulted and shot to death.
This is just disgusting all around, and it did not have to happen.
Police claim a 29-year-old Uber driver, Francisco Valadez, picked up the victim from work early Sunday morning and drove Dixon to her home at this apartment complex just a few feet from the woods where she was murdered. According to this affidavit, Valadez gave conflicting stories, but eventually admitted to shooting the victim while trying to have sex with her. After dumping Dixon's body, the suspect confessed he tried to have sex with her again.
This is a family's worst nightmare. We're disgusted by these allegations.
Police quickly used rideshare information from Uber to help track down the accused killer.
Rideshares continue to be an excellent and a safe option to use when you're out in our community.
While they insist the murder in these woods is an isolated incident, IMPD says rideshare users can always share their location with friends and family, and women should trust their instincts if things feel dangerous.
Women, you have a right to exist in this community safely, and you have a right to use these rideshares safely. Trust yourself.
This is disgusting. It's disturbing. Ms. Dixon, especially her family, no one deserves to be treated this way in our community.
Finally, formal charges by the prosecutor's office in this case are still pending. In the meantime, IMPD asks anyone who may have had a suspicious encounter with the suspect using rideshare in recent weeks to contact their department. Jesse Wells, CBS 4 News.
A spokesperson from Uber sent CBS 4 a statement saying in part, quote, "Our hearts break for Miss Dixon's family and loved ones in the midst of this tragedy. We will assist Indianapolis police however we can as they continue to investigate."
The man who accepted her ride request was Francisco Valadez, a driver with a background that now raises disturbing questions. Chanti trusted the process. She got into the car with the belief that she would be dropped off safely. There were no red flags, no warnings, just a woman trying to get home, and a driver who should have done nothing more than take her there. What happened next remains partially sealed in the silence of that car ride, but what is known is chilling. Chanti never made it home. Her body was found hours later, abandoned and lifeless. According to police, she was murdered by the very man entrusted with her safety. The specific details of the attack have not been fully disclosed to the public, but authorities described it as a vicious and premeditated act. Investigators allege that Valadez drove Chanti to a secluded area, far from any route that made sense for her destination. There, they believe, the crime took place. The fact that Chanti was likely unaware of what was happening until it was too late haunts those who knew and loved her. The terror she must have felt is something no one should ever have to imagine. When Chanti was reported missing, her family immediately sounded the alarm. They knew something was wrong. This wasn't like her. She would never leave her children behind. Police began tracing her last known movements, and that's when the rideshare connection came into focus. The trail led directly to Francisco Valadez. Once confronted with the mounting evidence, Valadez allegedly confessed to killing Chanti. The details of the motive remain murky. Some say it was personal. Others believe it was opportunistic, a predator who saw an opening and acted on it. Regardless of the why, the result is the same: a life stolen, children left motherless, and a family shattered beyond repair. What's even more alarming is how easily it all happened. Valadez was not flagged by the rideshare company as a threat. He passed the background checks. There was no system in place to predict this kind of danger. That's part of the tragedy. Chanti did everything right, and still, she ended up a victim. The timeline of events became clearer in the days that followed. Security footage, ride data, and witness statements helped piece together her final moments. As painful as the truth was, her family needed answers. They needed to know what happened to Chanti, not just for closure, but for justice. And justice, in this case, is still a work in progress. Valadez was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and the legal process is ongoing. But for Chanti's loved ones, no amount of prison time can undo what's been done. No verdict can bring her back. This chapter of her story marks the moment everything changed. A routine ride, a trusted system, a predator in disguise. What happened to Chanti Dixon is not just a crime. It's a wake-up call. A reminder that even the most ordinary moments can turn deadly when evil finds a way in. The morning after Chanti Dixon's body was discovered, the city of Cleveland, Ohio, woke up to devastating news. What was first a missing persons report quickly evolved into a homicide investigation, sending shockwaves through the local community. Chanti's name was suddenly everywhere, on news channels, social media feeds, and posters. But for her family, this wasn't just a headline. It was the worst kind of reality. Her mother, still trying to comprehend the unthinkable, stood before cameras and pleaded for justice. Holding back tears, she described her daughter as full of life, love, and purpose. She wasn't just another statistic. She was a mother, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. The public listened, watched, and grieved with her. The pain was palpable. In the days that followed, police arrested Francisco Valadez. Authorities charged him with first-degree murder, and the court documents began to paint a clearer picture of what transpired that night. Prosecutors described the killing as calculated and violent. Valadez, they alleged, used his job as a cover, a means to lure in someone vulnerable. The ride-sharing company, while cooperative, found itself facing serious questions about driver screening and passenger safety. The mundane act of a rideshare home transformed into a horrific nightmare for Chanti Dixon. What began as a routine trip concluded in a chilling display of violence, leaving a community grappling with grief and renewed calls for safety. The silver Honda Civic was nearing Chanti's destination when the driver, Francisco Valadez, veered into disturbing territory. His unsolicited confession of virginity, followed by an offer of money for sex, instantly shattered the neutrality of the vehicle's interior, replacing it with an unnerving tension. His words hung, a perverse and unexpected proposition. Chanti's reaction was an instinctive, nervous laugh, perhaps a defense mechanism against the sudden discomfort and perceived threat. This reflexive response, however, became the catalyst for Valadez's escalating rage. He later admitted to investigators that her laughter made him mad, twisting his fragile ego into a murderous fury. Embarrassment curdled into a deadly wrath. Without warning, he produced a handgun from beneath his seat, turning it on his unsuspecting passenger. Chanti had mere seconds to comprehend the unfolding horror. Did she attempt to escape? Did she plead for her life? The answers perished with her. Valadez pulled the trigger, a single shot striking her in the head. The muffled report of the gun went unheard in the quiet neighborhood that night. With Chanti gravely wounded or already deceased, Valadez continued driving to a secluded spot behind her residence. There, near a wooded area obscured by a concrete barrier, he halted the car and callously dragged her body out. In a final, grotesque act of depravity, he removed her clothing and attempted to sexually assault her corpse, a horrifying detail he would later confess to police. Before fleeing, he meticulously collected Chanti's cell phones and wallet, discarding them in the nearby woods in a calculated attempt to delay identification and obscure his involvement. As Monday, September 9th, dawned over Indianapolis, the tranquility of Chanti's neighborhood was shattered. Shortly after 7 a.m., a local resident out walking their dog made the horrifying discovery: a naked body partially concealed behind a concrete barrier near the woods. A frantic 911 call set in motion the investigation that would ultimately bring Chanti's killer to justice. First responders quickly arrived, cordoning off the scene with bright yellow crime tape. Detective Sarah Patel, leading the investigation, observed a single gunshot wound to the victim's head, indicative of an execution-style killing. The absence of clothing and the body's positioning immediately suggested a possible sexual motive. With no immediate identification, establishing the victim's identity became paramount. Crime scene technicians painstakingly documented the area, collecting trace evidence, including tire impressions in the soft ground near where the body had been dumped. They noted subtle drag marks, indicating the body had been moved from a vehicle. The medical examiner conducted a preliminary examination, estimating the time of death between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., mere hours before the discovery. Despite the killer's efforts to cleanse the scene, investigators found a crucial lead: droplets of blood leading from the concrete barrier toward the street, suggesting the perpetrator may have been injured or had blood on his clothing when he departed. By mid-morning, the investigation was in full swing, yet the victim remained unknown. That would soon change, as Chanti's family began to realize she had never made it home. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Valadez appeared in court with a stoic expression, offering little explanation. The judge denied bail, citing the severity of the crime and the risk to the public. A preliminary hearing was scheduled, and the justice system began its long and often painful process. For Chanti's loved ones, it felt like a surreal blur, each court date reopening wounds that hadn't even begun to heal. When Chanti Dixon failed to pick up her children from her mother's house on Monday morning, Rise Dixon was immediately consumed by a sense of dread. Her daughter was exceptionally reliable when it came to her children. Rise's repeated, unanswered calls to Chanti's phone only amplified her anxiety. By noon, she had contacted numerous friends and coworkers, none of whom had heard from Chanti since she left work. At 2:15 p.m., Rise Dixon arrived at the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department to file a missing person report, providing a detailed description of Chanti, including her last known outfit and distinctive tattoos. Crucially, she informed officers that Chanti had taken an Uber home. As Rise was filing her report, Detective Patel was reviewing preliminary findings from the crime scene. The description of the missing woman chillingly matched that of the unidentified victim. The investigation pivoted from identifying a Jane Doe to pursuing Chanti Dixon's killer. With Chanti Dixon identified, detectives immediately focused on her last known action: ordering an Uber. Detective Patel submitted an emergency data request to Uber's law enforcement response team. Within hours, the company provided critical information. Chanti had been picked up at 3:34 a.m. by driver Francisco Valadez in the silver Honda Civic. The data detailed the vehicle's entire route, including a single stop before reaching Chanti's neighborhood. Most damningly, the ride was never marked as completed in the system, and the $5 tip Chanti had added at 3:52 a.m. was the final activity on her account. Investigators noted that while the vehicle was registered in Uber's system, it belonged to a family member of Valadez. This initially complicated efforts to locate the car, but ultimately provided additional evidence when detectives discovered Valadez had frantically cleaned the vehicle's interior the morning after the murder. By Monday evening, less than 24 hours after Chanti's death, detectives had Valadez's name, address, and phone number. The next step was to bring him in for questioning. When detectives first approached Francisco Valadez at his apartment on Monday evening, he presented a calm and cooperative demeanor. He readily agreed to accompany them to the station for questioning, perhaps confident that his attempts to cover his tracks were sufficient. In his initial interview, Valadez maintained a ride had been completely routine. He claimed he picked up Chanti, made one stop at her request, dropped her off at her residence, and continued his night, insisting nothing unusual occurred. When asked why the ride was never marked as completed in the Uber system, he dismissed it as a simple oversight. As detectives pressed harder, Valadez's narrative began to unravel. In his second version, he claimed that after dropping Chanti off, He heard a gunshot and called the police non-emergency line to report it. Records, however, showed no such call. Confronted with this inconsistency, his story shifted again. His third account alleged that an armed black man had approached his vehicle and attempted to rob Chanti. According to this fabrication, the man shot Chanti in the thigh, causing her to flee the car. Valadez admitted to cleaning blood from his vehicle afterward, but maintained he was merely a witness to the crime. Detectives then presented a crucial fact. Chanti had been shot in the head, not the thigh. This contradiction visibly rattled Valadez. His fourth story claimed Chanti had attacked him during the ride, forcing him to shoot her in self-defense, a claim that physical evidence would soon refute. Finally, after 5 grueling hours of questioning and confronted with mounting inconsistencies, Valadez broke down. In a recorded confession, he admitted to propositioning Chanti, becoming enraged when she laughed at him, shooting her in the head, and attempting to sexually assault her body after death. Following Valadez's confession, detectives secured a search warrant for his apartment and vehicle. The findings corroborated his final account and exposed his desperate attempts to conceal the crime. In the silver Honda Civic, despite Valadez's vigorous cleaning efforts, forensic technicians discovered traces of blood in the back seat. Using luminol, which reveals blood even after cleaning, they found a spray pattern consistent with a gunshot wound to the head. Fibers matching Chanti's clothing were embedded in the seat cushions. Inside Valadez's apartment, investigators located the murder weapon, a 9mm handgun hidden in a kitchen vent. Ballistics later confirmed it matched the bullet recovered from Chanti's body. In the bathroom trash, they found bloody rags and cleaning supplies used in his attempt to sanitize the vehicle. Perhaps most damning were the searches on Valadez's phone from the hours after the murder. How to clean blood from car seats, and how long does DNA last? These digital breadcrumbs laid bare his panicked efforts to evade justice after extinguishing Chanti's life. At 4:37 a.m. on Tuesday, September 10th, less than 24 hours after Chanti Dixon's body was discovered, Francisco Valadez was formally arrested. He was charged with felony murder, attempted rape, and attempted abuse of a corpse, charges that carried the potential of a life sentence without parole. Valadez was led from the interrogation room in handcuffs, his head bowed as officers escorted him to a holding cell. The following day, he appeared before a judge at the Marion County Courthouse, entering a not guilty plea despite his confession. The judge ordered him held without bail at the Marion County Jail, citing the heinous nature of the crime and the clear risk to public safety. Francisco Valadez made his first court appearance on Wednesday, September 11th, at the Marion County Courthouse. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit with his hands shackled at his waist, he stood before Judge Marianne Voorhees as the charges were read: felony murder, attempted rape, and attempted abuse of a corpse. Despite his detailed confession to police, Valadez entered a not guilty plea through his court-appointed attorney. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rebecca Lawson, requested Valadez be held without bail, citing both the brutality of the crime and his status as a flight risk. The defendant has demonstrated not only a capacity for extreme violence, but also a calculated attempt to cover up his actions, Lawson argued. Judge Voorhees concurred, ordering Valadez to remain in custody at the Marion County Jail. The case is expected to proceed slowly through the legal system, with a preliminary hearing scheduled for October 15th. If convicted on all charges, Valadez faces a potential sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The prosecution has not yet announced whether they will seek the death penalty. I keep waiting for her to walk through that door, but I know she won't. Rise Dixon's tearful words at a press conference articulated the devastating reality confronting Chanti's family. Rise now carries the dual burden of processing her own grief while becoming the primary caregiver for Chanti's 2 children, who are struggling to comprehend their mother's sudden absence. The 13-year-old son has become withdrawn, his teachers reporting he sits silently through classes. The 10-year-old daughter asks daily when her mother is coming home, unable to fully grasp the permanence of death. How do you explain to a child that their mother was killed because she said no? Rise questioned, her voice breaking. The family has established a memorial fund to assist with funeral expenses and the children's future needs. Rise has vowed to keep Chanti's memory alive, telling reporters, "Don't let what happened to her diminish what she put out in the world. If you want to honor her memory, show love and kindness, because that's what she would have wanted." The murder of Chanti Dixon ignited immediate outrage across Indianapolis and beyond. Indianapolis Metro Police Chief Chris Bailey described the crime as utterly revolting and disturbing in a press conference, emphasizing that it could have been avoided. Uber swiftly banned Valadez from their platform and issued a statement. "We are heartbroken by this senseless act of violence. Our thoughts are with the victim's family during this unimaginably difficult time." The company pledged full cooperation with the investigation, but faced renewed criticism about driver screening processes. Local advocacy groups organized a vigil outside Chanti's workplace, where hundreds gathered with candles to honor her memory and call for increased rideshare safety measures. The hashtag Justice for Chanti began trending on social media, with many sharing their own rideshare safety concerns. At the same time, the community rallied. Vigils were held in her honor. Friends and strangers gathered with candles, photos, and handwritten signs reading, "Justice for Chanti." Her story touched many, especially women who recognized themselves in her everyday decisions. It could have been any of them, and that realization stirred a collective sense of heartbreak and anger. Advocacy groups began calling for stricter background checks on rideshare drivers and for new safety features in the apps themselves. Some pushed for mandatory dash cams, emergency alerts, and real-time ride tracking that could be shared with family. Chanti's case reignited a nationwide conversation about rideshare safety, prompting both public and political responses. Local leaders condemned the act, but also acknowledged the systemic failures that allowed it to happen. "We can't bring Chanti back," one council member said, "but we can honor her by making sure this never happens again." Bills were discussed in city meetings, legislation that would hold companies more accountable for the people they put behind the wheel. Meanwhile, Chanti's children were left without their mother. Family members stepped in, doing their best to shield the young ones from the full weight of what had happened. But even at their young age, they knew something had changed. Something was missing, someone who had always been their anchor. Through all of this, Chanti's name never faded. Social media campaigns kept her story alive, ensuring she wouldn't be forgotten. Her family continued to speak out, not only for her, but for the countless other women who face violence without warning. Chanti had become more than a victim. She became a symbol of lost potential, of a broken system, and of the fight for change. This episode of the story is still unfolding. The court proceedings are ongoing, and the pain is still raw. But one thing is clear. Chanti's life mattered. Her story has sparked conversations, actions, and reforms. And in the wake of her tragedy, a community found strength, not just to mourn, but to demand better. Rise Dixon is determined that her daughter will be remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived. Chanti was love in human form. Rise told mourners at the memorial service, held 1 week after her daughter's death. The family has established the Chanti Dixon Foundation, which will focus on rideshare safety education and supporting children who have lost parents to violent crime. Chanti's children have started grief counseling, where they're encouraged to share memories of their mother. They've created a memory box filled with photos, letters, and small mementos that capture Chanti's spirit. Through these efforts, her family ensures that Chanti's legacy of love, generosity, and resilience will endure long after the headlines fade. While no safety measure can guarantee complete protection against those intent on harm, certain precautions may help reduce risks when using rideshare services. Always verify driver and vehicle details before entering. Double-check that the license plate, car model, and driver photo match what's displayed in your app. When the driver arrives, ask, "Who are you here for?" rather than volunteering your name first. Share your trip details with a trusted contact. Utilize the app's Share Trip Status feature so someone you trust has your driver's information and can track your journey in real time. Sit in the back seat whenever possible, preferably behind the passenger seat. This positioning provides more distance from the driver and offers access to exits on both sides of the vehicle. Keep your phone in hand and visible throughout the ride. Consider making a call or pretending to be on a call during the trip, especially if you begin to feel uncomfortable. Have you ever felt unsafe during a rideshare? What safety measures do you personally take when getting into a stranger's car? Share your experiences in the comments below. This conversation could be vital in saving lives. If you found this story impactful, please consider hitting that like button to help spread awareness about rideshare safety to a wider audience. Thank you for watching and for honoring Chanti Dixon's life with your attention and empathy. Please share this video, subscribe for more true crime stories with purpose, and remember, awareness saves lives. Let's keep Misha's name alive, not just in sorrow, but in action.